Wild Harvest Edibles, Part 35. An important note: as you navigate any health challenge, it is always recommended that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of the care of the human body in disease and in health. The information shared in this presentation is meant to educate and improve your wellness toolbox and aid in returning to health if sick and maintaining good health when well. It should not be construed as medical advice, simply as tools that have been successfully used by others in similar situations. As always, investigate and verify any treatment, protocol, or procedure for yourself, not blindly accepting anything without due diligence. Thomas Edison said, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." Very forward-thinking thought for his time. In 1885, Ellen White stated in the Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 443, that there are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, water, pure air, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all, with but little expense, but drugs are expensive, both in the outlay of means, that is money, and the effect produced on the system. 3 John 1, verse 2 says, "Beloved, I pray that you prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." A good reminder that a healthy soul, a soul connected to God, is one that can be healthy and be able to prosper in this world as well as in the world to come, and in our health. It's very intimately tied and connected together. In Romans 12, 1 and 2, we are admonished that we are to present our bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. It's not unreasonable, it's reasonable. And do not be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So being transformed by the renewing of your mind in Christ Jesus, in His Holy Spirit, changes us and proves what is the perfect will and acceptable will of God. Today's topic is Kinnikinnik, Arctostaphylos uva ursi, or Arbutus uva ursi. So oftentimes it is just simply known as uva ursi, but this is a very common Pacific Northwest plant. It's also known as bearberry, mountain, upland, or hog cranberry, bear's grape, or red bearberry. It's actually a small, low-lying evergreen shrub. It's typical of higher elevations in North America, from Appalachia all the way to the western seaboard on the Pacific coast. It prefers dry, acidic, sandy or gravelly soils, which is very typical of the glacial till that covers much of North America. It's a member of the heath family, in the same family as the blueberry. Some identifying features include alternate paddle-shaped leaves, so they alternate on the stem. So being paddle-shaped, they're wider at the end and narrower at the petiole end where it attaches to the stem. Very small and shiny leaves that are evergreen. And they're very stiff and thick feeling, and have a kind of a thickness to them. The underside is a lighter shade of green. It tends to turn color kind of a reddish brown in the fall. The buds have 3 scales. They're rather urn-shaped, and they're white or pink, flowering from May to June. The fruit typically are present from July on through the winter. The fruit have 5 hard seeds. It's a reddish fruit, and it has a low-growing, fibrous, matted main stem that is very low-growing, tight to the ground. From an edibility standpoint, the fruit is edible, but not considered delicious. It's cranberry-like, can be used in a dry form or as a fresh form. It's rarely eaten in quantity or used in cooking, but sometimes was used traditionally in a prepared preparation known as pemmican. So traditionally, pemmican was a dried meat, berry, and fat mixture, very high calorie, high nutrients, and a way to preserve food in a way through the winter or for traveling purposes. Very calorically dense preserved food. Here's a vegetarian pemmican recipe that uses Kinnikinnik because we know that steering away from animal products and animal fats is the best way to long-term health and is actually ultimately the diet of heaven, in that there will be no death or dying of animals in heaven. So take 2 cups of raw nuts or seeds, soak them overnight. You want to soak them overnight and rinse them because that removes the lectins that protect the seed from injury during its stage of dormancy, and it imbibes water as it's getting ready to germinate and activate and sprout. And that's the state that you want to consume your seeds, and you want to remove those lectins and rinse those away. So rinse them. You mix a mixture of seeds and nuts. A half a tablespoon of coconut oil. This is a saturated fat that becomes solid at room temperature, but is a healthy saturated fat coming from plants and will help give a body to the pemmican and hold it together. 1.5 cups of dried fruit of your choice. You can just choose anything that you have on hand or would like. Cherries, apples, apricots, in this case, Kinnikinnik berries. Definitely include those in the recipe. 1 tablespoon of flaxseed. And you may actually choose to use chia or something else like that, because chia has a tendency to go rancid. Not chia, flaxseed tends to go rancid over time as it's exposed to air. If you're using ground flaxseed. So a pinch of sea salt, a half a cup of honey, and a 1/4 cup of water. So preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Lightly toast your seeds and add the coconut oil. Pulse that mix in a food processor and add the fruit, flax, and salt, and pulse it again in the food processor. Process it on slow and add honey and water mixture, and then press it into a pan on parchment paper. Bake it for 25 to 30 minutes and then cool and cut into bars for eating. So using Kinnikinnik from a medicinal standpoint, the leaves, the berries, and are typically used from a tincture perspective from a medicinal standpoint. So for the urinary system, it's very effective for inflamed nephrons, known as nephritis. Anything that is has an inflammation basis, has an itis, like interstitial cystitis or myocarditis, is an inflammation. So in this case, it's the urinary system. So cystitis is another bladder lining inflammatory condition. Urinary tract infections can also benefit from the use of Kinnikinnik. It has a diuretic effect, increasing urine volume, which also helps to mobilize and move out any pathogens that may be lodged in the urinary tract. It has antiseptic properties and helps to reduce additional excess bacteria from the kidney, bladder, and urinary tract through its diuretic action. Helps to reduce bladder inflammation and the pain associated with that, and kidney infections and kidney stones. It helps to reduce uric acid, which in that regard helps to reduce symptoms of gout, because uric acid is the primary causal agent of gout, lodging in some of the main joints, like the great toe is a classic lodging point for uric acid crystals causing pain. An alkaline diet is helpful in maintaining an absence of kidney stones, and eliminating the use of seafood is also a key factor. Many people forget that seafood is considered an animal-based protein and product and needs to be avoided along with fish. So use the Kinnikinnik at the first sign of infection. It's helpful for UTIs to use a blended tincture of goldenrod, Oregon grapefruit, and usnea, which is a lichen. Unsweetened cranberry juice. So this is in the same family, hog, cranberry, bog, cranberry, Kinnikinnik, and also a vegetable-based diet to alkalize the diet and eliminate the use of animal products like milk and meat and seafood. So in the female urinary tract urogenital system, Kinnikinnik, or uva ursi, as it's commonly seen and known, is a helpful medicinal property used as a tea or a tincture. Helps to reduce chronic urethra inflammation. And the leaf tannins are astringent, i.e. they pull tissues together and helps reduce systemic inflammation. For vaginal infections that seem to be persistent, a bacterial or yeast infection based on those two causal agents can be aided by the uva ursi or Kinnikinnik, used as a leaf and berry tea or as a douche or a sitz bath up to 2 times daily. So you see a couple diagrams here of a commode-based apparatus for doing a douche. Keeps it clean and less messy, or a sitz bath, just a simple tub that you can sit in a basin in warm water with a Kinnikinnik tea infusion. It's helpful for postpartum or uterine hemorrhage. Essentially, again, we see that tannin-based astringent action is very beneficial for drawing tissues together, which is what can help to minimize or reduce the hemorrhaging, the postpartum trauma from uterine contraction and hemorrhaging that sometimes can occur there. Helps to heal incisions again because of that astringent action and infections. And this douche or sitz bath can function in that astringent quality. Long-term use, if you're a nursing mother, you don't want to use it long-term. So just initially after postpartum trauma or hemorrhaging associated with that, not using it during the nursing period of a child. So it'd be a fairly short-term use. Very good source of vitamin C. So prevention of scurvy, which can be, vitamin C can be difficult thing to obtain from fresh sources during the wintertime. That's typically when scurvy would manifest itself in traditional populations that relied on fresh food. The sailors of the British Navy became known as limeys because they would carry citrus with them as a vitamin C source, because sailors often had a dearth or lack of fresh food, which caused a lack of vitamin C and would initiate scurvy scourges aboard the ships. So uva ursi or Kinnikinnik is a great local source of vitamin C throughout the wintertime. Again, it can be preserved as Kinnikinnik or dried berries, or the berries harvested through the winter in areas of access. So bearberry tea or Kinnikinnik tea or eating of the berries is a good source of vitamin C in the wintertime. Can be helpful for cramping, intestinal or stomach cramping. Can function as a muscle relaxant and relieve intestinal cramping. Has antiseptic properties that help prevent diarrhea and stomach upsets. The lower right picture, you can see the woven or intertwined mat, low-growing Kinnikinnik berries there, rhododendron up above it there, and just creeping along the ground. Nice mat above, growing over the rock with the berries very, very prominently prevalent. This must be a late season bush here. Some tips for harvest. The leaves, harvest from mid-spring to mid-fall, are optimal times for harvest. Pick the berries when they're mature, before the first frost, but you can harvest them even afterwards if you miss that, and on through the season. They just become less plump, and they begin to decay as after they've been frozen. So one note of caution, people with high blood pressure should avoid their use, probably due to their astringent nature in drawing tissue together. If they have a history of high blood pressure, pregnant and nursing women should not use. Just use that initially during postpartum or hemorrhaging issues postpartum. May induce nausea in some people, so just, with any new thing that you start, go with caution in smaller quantities to begin usage of it. Can cause stomach irritation in some people. One thing that you can do is soak the leaves overnight and rinse them off, and that can reduce some of the tannins and reduce the intensity of some of the nausea and stomach upset that can be experienced. That's particularly in the leaves. So not to be used long-term, particularly the leaves, more of an acute remedy for situations. And finally, looking at the making of a Kinnikinnik or uva ursi leaf and berry tea. So first of all, pre-soak the leaves and berries overnight to help reduce the tannin quantity and rinse off those tannins and wash them away. And using the leaf only can also be a helpful way of making the Kinnikinnik tea. So 3 tablespoons of dried leaves and berries, chopped, and 1 quart of water. Soak those leaves and berries in cold water overnight, rinse and drain, and then bring 1 quart of water to a boil. Add the soaked berries and leaves and reduce to the heat to a simmer and cook. Cover it tightly and simmer that tea for 5 minutes. So in a way, this is kind of a decoction type of tea as opposed to an infusion where you just steep it. So you're actually simmering it for 5 minutes to extract the medicinal qualities from the leaves and the berries. Remove from the heat and let it steep a further 30 minutes. So 5 minutes, 30 seconds at minimum. Strain it, so you're straining out the particulate matter, the leaves and the berry parts, and then drink 1 cup 2 to 3 times a day, lukewarm, on an empty stomach. So that again would be for an acute type of a situation. Wouldn't want to be using that for a prolonged period of time necessarily. So that's making Kinnikinnik or uva ursi leaf and berry tea. So that's an overview of some of the benefits of Kinnikinnik, which is a wild plant that grows natively from Appalachia all the way to the West Coast.